Well, we're live again, and it's good to see you. Thanks for coming in. We're going to be talking about a very fascinating book today that I want to just really pump up more than just because this is an incredible book that speaks to what's going on in our world today, because it's speaking about what was going on in the world years ago during the Cold War, 1982. The name of the book is Walk in the Woods by Paul Nitze and Yuli Kvitsinsky. It is subtitled A Negotiation That Almost Changed the World. We're having a kind of a tense time right now in our world with a number of little wars going on. I shouldn't say little wars going on around the world. During the height of the Cold War in 1982, now this is taking us back a few years, height of the Cold War in 1982. So put this in perspective, Reagan had just taken over in 1981 in January. The Iranian crisis that was happening in 1979, 1980 was ended about a minute after Reagan was sworn in as president in 1981, January 20th. This is a year later. And the Soviets and the Americans were building their nuclear arsenals to be sure that they didn't get the one-upsmanship. We wanted to be sure that we were in first place. They wanted to be sure they were in first place, yada, yada. 1982. Well, 7 years later, the Soviet Union collapsed. But in the meantime, we didn't know that was going on. It was that constant threat of a nuclear opportunity hanging over us, all of us in the world. In 1982, the United States and Soviet Union were locked in a dangerous arms race. Formal negotiations had become tense, rigid, political, and largely ineffective. Both sides distrusted each other, and every proposal was viewed through the lens of power, fear, and global image. American negotiator Paul Nitze and Soviet diplomat Yuli Kvitsinsky decided to step away from the official meeting rooms in Geneva and take a private walk in the woods. Away from the cameras, the bureaucracy, and the political pressure, the two men engaged in honest conversation about both nations might reduce nuclear weapons while preserving mutual security. Security is already always an issue in relationships. And what they were trying to do, frankly, was to figure out a win-win situation for both of them and for both of their countries, and actually win-win for the world. Call it a win-win-win. That's reminiscent of Stephen Covey's highly effective people habit number 4, win-win. And habit number 5, this is about Covey, but it's about Covey's got some great things to talk about. Habit number 5 is seek first to understand and then to be understood. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. The discussions became known as the Walk in the Woods proposal. Although their compromise was ultimately rejected by leaders in Washington and Moscow, the effort became one of the most respected examples of diplomacy, human connection, and leadership under pressure. Story demonstrates that breakthroughs often occur not through power or intimidation, but through trust, listening, humility, and authentic conversation. Understanding the other's perspective. An overarching statement of this book was sometimes the greatest breakthroughs in history begin when two people stop defending their positions and start understanding each other. We were talking this morning on our mastermind about how the difference in a word makes a difference, because these people were not talking to each other or at each other. They were talking with each other, and they were walking in the same direction so they could see the same thing out in front of them. They saw together what could be. And I really appreciated that. Coming from a Hawaii operating system perspective, and knowing what my how is in the why operating system, I'm a better way. And I can't help but think that both of these men probably had better way and trust as part of their why operating systems. Talking point one, human connection changes outcomes. This book talks about why informal conversations often succeed where formal meetings fail. In formal meetings, you're talking at each other. In informal conversations, you're talking with each other. The importance of relationship building before problem solving. They liked each other. They truly liked each other. And in liking each other and knowing that we had a big tense situation going on, let's see if we can scoot this thing along a little bit. And how trust lowers defensiveness. The trust was a big factor here in this relationship. Trust lowers defensiveness and increases creativity. When you're safe and secure and trusting in a relationship, you can come up with great ideas, masterminding themselves. And also this talks about why leaders must create space for authentic dialogue, not just positioning statements. You know, I think of when I'm thinking about this book, I'm thinking about the Security Council at the United Nations. Those guys are always talking at each other. Very little dialogue. There's always a bunch of monologues, a bunch of series of monologues. Talking point number two, fear is a terrible decision maker. Fear fueled the nuclear arms race on both sides. The danger of a worst case scenario thinking, like we were talking about mutually assured destruction this morning. Most of the people on the call that we had, this mastermind, had never heard of that term, mutually assured destruction. If one missile goes, a whole bunch of missiles will follow from both sides. So it was a mutually assured destruction. So what we needed to do was to actually communicate with each other about how we can safeguard an accidental going off or whatever. I wasn't part of the discussions. I don't know. But I can just imagine they were talking about what happens if. Because there are a lot of safeguards in the nuclear world, but sometimes things happen. You saw the Hunt for Red October, a great movie. You just don't know what other kind of things are going on because there's a lot of people involved in the situation. And then why organizations often resist change. Why do we not look for opportunities to change, to make things better? And lastly, how fear-based leadership creates rigidity and conflict. This proposal was ultimately rejected by both Moscow and Washington. But the thing is that they were so incredibly rigid in the way they were looking at it. Couldn't this have been a blueprint for moving forward even better? But there has to be two sides in this deal, not just one. And in fact, because it was so incredibly stalemated, it was hard to move off the dime. That's really unfortunate. Obviously, history tells us that eventually it devolved, but here we are. Talking point number three in this book, ego can block progress. This book talks about how political image prevented compromise. I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to give in because giving in would be weakness. And why winning becomes more important than solving problems. I want to be the victor, no matter what. The role of humility and effective leadership is totally understated. Humility and effective leadership needs to be part of the process. And how organizations feel trapped by protecting their turf, rice bowling, if you will, have you heard that expression, and authority. Incredibly powerful. So talking point number one, human connection changes outcomes, or at least has a possibility of changing outcomes. Point number two, fear is a terrible decision maker. When you're making decisions based on fear, you get some really bad decisions. Point number three, ego can block progress. We just talked about that, especially about turf protection. Talking point number four, trust moves faster than policy. policy is kind of like a big cruise liner. It's hard to turn that bad boy on a dime. It's got so much mass and momentum doesn't allow it to turn quickly. Trust accelerates communication and collaboration. Can I get an amen on that? And also suspicion. I don't know if I can trust you. Slows organizations and relationships. They talk about the value of psychological safety on teams. But if you break out the credibility of leadership currency, leadership, those two guys were leaders. They weren't the leader, but they were leaders. And they saw an opportunity to make things better, to get things rolling, to get things to a point where it wasn't quite as tense. And like I said, ultimately the proposal was rejected. Proposal is not really the whole point of this book. It's about how we can get together and talk with each other as we move forward along the same path, so we can see the same things. Talking point number 5, one conversation can change history. And in this case, one conversation didn't change history, but it gave us good fuel and ammunition, if you will. That's maybe not a good term here. It gave us good talking points about how impactful just one relationship, one conversation, one initiative can make a difference. Because that was an incredible, courageous step out that both of those guys did. It's important that small moments can create major turning points. It's the details. The big deal is going to take care of itself. But if you take care of the small details, the small moments, you might have an opportunity to slip in and make something even bigger. The ripple effect of respectful communications is huge. It's huge. It's huge. And you can understand that they both understood each other. And when they came back to their respective groups, they had a conversation with their groups separately about the other person and the other party and the other perspective. Wow. And leaders influence culture through everyday interactions. Leaders are important. Not just the people that are on the title leader, but leaders. Everybody in an organization using their own leadership skills to create a greater whole, if you will. So a challenge question for you today is, what conflict in your life or organization might improve if someone chose conversation over confrontation? I'm thinking about, can I say? Situations in divorce, or situations in real estate communications, situations, whatever. A Walk in the Woods is more than a story about nuclear weapons and Cold War diplomacy. It's a timeless lesson about leadership, communication, trust, and humanity. The negotiators remind us that many conflicts continue, not because of solutions that are impossible, but because of fear, ego, politics, and mistrust. These two gentlemen prove that progress becomes possible when people are willing to step away from positions, listen honestly, and seek common ground. The book challenges leaders to remember that relationships often solve problems that authority ever can. As a realtor, I've had some very, very good transactions. And invariably, the best ones have been where both realtors are on the same page and they say the end game is what's really important. Let's get this done for our clients. And so there's always some stuff going on. Sometimes there's just a few little issues. Sometimes there's some big issues. But communication and relationships are really what wins today. And this is probably a book that many should know about, should read, should get it, because this is an incredibly important issue that I think deserves energy and focus. Thank you very much for tuning in today. If you want to know more about what I've got going on in my program, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. My name is Paul Wilson. My email address is paul@wilsonabq.com. And my website is paulwilsondelivers.com. You can go there and find out some things we got going on. We're actually updating that. We've got a program that will give you the basics of your Why operating system. We've talked about that before for $97, a rather intense hour and a half view of who you are. That's a $497 value. We got a $49.97 3-month program for aligning yourself with who you are, breaking out who you are and figuring out who you are so that you can be all you can be. And then we have some other programs that are more intense and long-term. My phone number is 505-706-2868. If you want to get a hold of me, you can go on that website, figure out a time you can get on my calendar. We can have a 20 to 30-minute talk about who you are and see if we can work together. But if anything is just making sure that you are understanding about your alignment. Alignment is so incredibly important. I'm understanding that more and more as I get into this business of coaching people. Most people are not aligned. Most people are out of alignment a little bit. Some people a lot of it. And we see that on the statistics that Gallup recently posed. Gallup said that 31% of the workforce in the United States is engaged. That means that 70 or 69% of the workforce is not engaged, not aligned, not in tune with what their bosses got going on. And of that 69%, up to 20% are actually negatively disengaged, or even more the word they used is what's the word? Actively disengaged, so they're working against the company that they're working with. They're processing food, occupying time and space, and being disastrous potentially to the company they're working with. That's crazy. Hope you're doing well today. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you learned something from this, and hopefully you can send this on to those that might be of interest to this. I look forward to talking to you in the near future. Thank you very much. God bless.